Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Neuroalchemy, a NeuroSynergy podcast where we explore the meeting place of science, soul, and the nonlinear path of becoming. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Young, the founder of NeuroSynergy Integrative Health and an integrative practitioner. Here on this show, we define every term like you're hearing it for the very first time because clarity builds safety, and safety is what allows real healing to happen. Today, we're joined by Dr. Rachel Evans, a psychologist whose work beautifully blends trauma-informed care, evidence-based understanding of the brain, and a compassionate truth that healing is never about willpower. It's about nervous system safety. Rachel helps people untangle patterns that once protected them, but no longer serve their lives, their identities, or their relationships. Her work is grounded, accessible, and deeply human. And I know today's conversation will speak to anyone who has ever felt stuck and didn't know why. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
To begin, I'd love to set some shared language for everyone listening. When you use the phrase trauma-informed, how do you define that in simple, everyday language?
Yeah, let me try because when you were mentioning about the definitions in the beginning, I was like, oh, do you know, sometimes we do use these words, don't we? And we just assume everyone knows what we mean by it. And sometimes when people ask me, I'm like, do I even know to explain what I mean by it? I guess to me, it just means having that understanding of how trauma impacts people and an awareness that the things that I might say might be perceived in a way by my clients, by their body that, maybe that's not safe if I'm not careful about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. So I think you've really put me on the spot here. Like, how do I define this? Because I think it's such a buzzword at the minute, isn't it? How do you define it?
I think you did a great job. I think that's great.
I think as well from the side note, like having my own experience of trauma as an identifiable one thing that happened, like the birth of my first child felt traumatic, for me has given me a really different understanding of how, people can put stuff across in the best way, but then it comes across to someone else as traumatic. So I think to me, I'm trying to be mindful of what my clients have told me, in terms of them, what I will say to them. I guess that's how I do it.
Very good. Listeners will hear us talk about survival patterns today. How would you explain what a survival pattern is in a way that feels clear and accessible?
Okay, let's try. I think to me, it's the things that you have learnt growing up. I guess maybe not always, sometimes learnt cognitively a way in order to survive in that environment, that you've had to adapt a certain way that maybe wouldn't have been the way you would have done it if there wasn't some kind of threat to you, which could have been like a physical threat or a psychological threat that you felt like you had to adapt to that. And I think sometimes these survival patterns can be maladaptive if we're going to go on to talk about, how it can impact people's relationship with food and relationship with their body. However, I think some are learned, but some are almost automatic in our response to it, that it is our nervous system doing that. And we're not thinking, oh, this is how I'm going to respond to that situation because it might get a good outcome. Like, we've just done it before we even think about doing it. It's almost like natural to do it in that situation. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely does. Absolutely does. When you talk about the nervous system, seeing safety or danger, how would you explain that process to someone hearing it for the first time?
Good question. I guess I would probably explain it if a client just came to me about, like, what is your capacity to cope with these things until you start either getting maybe underregulated, in which case people might be feeling like, do you know, when you get those times that you just don't want to get off the sofa and do anything, you should do it, but you're also like, feel like you're stuck there and you're telling yourself, like, go and do it. But so, like, I guess things feel dampened down. Or people might say, oh, I'm feeling depressed today. They haven't had a diagnosis of depression, but they're feeling quite quite low, like physically, or the opposite end is almost, you might have heard of it as like, I guess, the fight and flight when you're very activated. And we could feel that in our body, like your heart is racing, you feel like you either want to run away, obviously, or, fight. And there's options, is that the right word? There's fawn and other fight. What is it? Fight? But I can't say it when I start trying. It's too many F's. It's like a tongue twister, isn't it? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So I guess freeze is what I was talking about in the beginning. And there's also fawn, which doesn't get talked about as much, actually. I guess for me, my experience of the birth trauma was actually the most upsetting part of it. And I think we do learn that as well as women quite a lot, to go into that fawn state, which I guess could be easily described as like people pleasing, that you're doing what you think you need to do in that situation to please people, to get through it, which does sometimes lead to physical safety, but sometimes it doesn't, because you've done things that maybe you wouldn't ordinarily do. So yeah, I guess that's how I'd explain it.
Yeah, for me, I think you and I chatted a little bit before our call, and being someone that myself had some childhood trauma, some of the side effects, if you will, are that when I'm sleeping, if somebody opens the door, my body wakes up
Mm.
immediately. There is not a breath in between. And even though I've worked through my patterns and I've done a lot of healing and I feel safe in my body and in my environment now, my nervous system was trained from a very young age to recognize and respond to perceived danger, right? So for me, that nervous system sensing safety or danger, it could be totally benign things, somebody slamming a door or somebody opening a door, when my body is resting. So you gave some
Yeah.
really, really good examples.
Well, I know we're going to go on to talk about eating, and I've already mentioned birth trauma a few times just because that's my like almost discrete experience of trauma to like relate things to. But yeah, one of the things that I felt triggered by was I was going to the shop and there was someone in like a purple polo neck, and the midwives at my birth had that same purple polo neck. And I was almost like, I don't know if I can go in this shop now. I knew it wasn't that midwife, but I so felt it in my body.
Right.
And I think it's when it comes to me saying stuff is trauma informed. Like if I turn up on a call wearing something, I wouldn't know if that would be upsetting to the client. I can't know everything about them, can I? But I can try to do other stuff that's in my power. If I knew a certain color upset them, then I obviously wouldn't wear that color to the session. But I think it is so sometimes quite niche, isn't it? The things that we um, get triggered by or respond to afterwards.
And it doesn't always make sense to other people. Just like you were just saying, the way that your nervous system encoded that specific visual cue, right? Your nervous system automatically responded to that, like danger, even though maybe even logically you knew. Sometimes that's exactly what we mean when we're talking about that nervous system reacting to a perceived danger, is like my nervous system's reacting even though I don't have any logical thing to hang that up on. Rachel, we're also going to explore the idea of feeling stuck. What does that actually mean from the brain perspective?
Good question. I guess I would describe it as that maybe not, this is not the physiological parts of the brain, but I think it's almost that feeling that you want to do something different. You have those thoughts of like, okay, I want to change this because maybe you've recognized this is not working for me. Maybe in terms of like the behaviors that you were saying, waking up when a door slams shut is so adaptive in the beginning. But now you're like, I'm safe. I don't want to keep doing that. Or maybe it's not having too much impact on your life because it doesn't happen that often. But, if you were like a student or something and it kept happening, you'd be like, I don't want to keep waking up every time like my flatmate comes in at 3 a.m. in the morning. So I think it's often we have that recognition that we do want to make a change and do something, but our brain is so used to, thinking certain thoughts and running certain patterns and certain habits that it just does the thing that we almost don't want it to do anymore. And I think that's when people feel stuck in that.
So feeling like it's difficult to break free from the patterns that seem to be automatic, that's a really nice way of putting it. If you had to choose one word for how you're arriving to the podcast today, emotionally or energetically. What would you say?
One word. I'm so bad at this. I was joking the other day, like as a psychologist, I am not good at giving you one feeling word. I can describe very well, but not one
You're
word.
not limited.
One word.
Don't be limited.
Okay. How am I arriving? Actually, do you know, funny enough, quite settled. I feel like I've made peace with stuff it's 11 for me when we're recording this because we're in different countries. But yeah, I've made peace with stuff that's happened today. I've done some tapping, which we might come on to talk about, and I'm feeling good. Your energy is very calming. I'm like, okay, we're doing this. We're calm. You're very affirming to me. So I'm feeling quite settled now.
Very good. I love that so much. And what feeling do you hope our listeners are going to carry with them as they hear your story today?
I think like optimism, maybe.
Very good. And you said not just one word. I was just waiting for more.
Done it. I've done it.
For listeners who are new to your work, can you share a little about your personal healing journey and how it shaped the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, I will try and share it in a nutshell because obviously there's so many elements that go into something. But essentially, I did a psychology degree. I always knew that I wanted to be a psychologist. I've always felt since I was really little like I wanted to help people, and before I even knew what a psychologist was, I felt like I wanted to do that job. However, I only had like the academic understanding of it. I would say I had pretty good mental health. You could spend a whole podcast defining what that means, but I mean, in terms of I usually felt quite balanced, and I would be stressed about exams, but then the exams would be over, and it would be okay. And then I think growing up in like the late 90s and the 2000s, it was very much like thin is in. I was seeing that in a lot of magazines, diet culture. I became more affected by that when I was at university, going on different diets and things, but I would always come off the diet. Until one time I did not come off the diet, which there were various factors that I can now see were involved in that, with like the stress of leaving university and having to have a job. And I'd put a lot of my self-worth on being good at exams because that's what I'd been praised for growing up. I also did sport to an international level. I did competitive life saving. If anyone knows what that is, please send me a message and get in contact because no one ever knows what it is. But yeah, so I
Let's
did.
tell us what it is.
So basically, it's like swimming, but not swimming. Like you do swimming races for some of it, but it's got like you can like put a picture in the show notes. You have to like swim with a mannequin that's full of water, like you're towing it, and then you get points to like if its head goes in the water, because obviously if you're towing a real person, you wouldn't want the head to go in the water. So there's like the sport kind of side of it, and then the other side with a different national competition that we have is like they set up an incident. So they might pretend like a boat's crashed and someone's broken their arm and someone's drowning, and like you have to go and save them in a certain way and work in a team, and then you get points for different aspects of it. So it was really fun. I mean, it was really social. I did it since I was like 12. So it was like a massive part of my life. I did it at university. I was like on the social committee. I was seeing my friends there all the time. And then when I got to master's level, I decided to do a master's because I didn't know what to do with my life and get a job. So I was like, I'll just do a master's. Then I didn't have that anymore. And I don't think I realized at the time what impact it had. Like now I look back at it and I think I have grief about leaving that I didn't recognize for ages because I couldn't look at the pictures. Like I'm a little bit showing my age, when it comes up on Facebook memories, like all those drunk night outs that I had with life saving, like I couldn't look at it for years because I was so upset about it. And I think that fed into me because I wasn't doing the training, getting more obsessed about like, well, I'll work out on my own, I'll eat healthy. And then I took like being good at eating healthy. I put my self-worth on that. Does that make sense? That was like, I'm going to be the best at eating healthy now. And then there were so many new rules that I could see from social media and things that really just fed into it until I just felt like there's hardly any foods that are okay for me to eat, or like I need to look a certain way for people to respect me because I wanted to go into health promotion. So then I ended up getting a research job abroad, and everyone's like, that's really fantastic. Isn't that so exciting? Like I was living in Singapore from England. People think it's quite exciting. I was like, well, not really, because I was obsessed with food and exercise. And then because I wasn't eating enough, like I couldn't really control my emotions. I would just get really upset about things. And then it just has so many other knock-on impacts. I couldn't go and eat out something because I was worried about what was in it. And then I came home a bit early. Then I ended up living with my parents. I'm working with my parents because I didn't know what job to do. And they had a factory making lampshades, which actually someone had to point this out to me, was actually really good that I had that experience because I work in private practice now. I did learn some about like running a business and like how to do accounts and stuff from when I worked there. But at the time it felt really shit. I was like really lucky to be supported by them because I didn't have a job at that point. And they were like, okay, come and live at home so I don't have to be paying rent and things. But they were kind of on my case because obviously I wasn't eating enough and I was exercising multiple times a day and I was not okay, but I did not see it. Like, I had a degree in psychology. I'd done an exam about eating disorders. I got an award for that exam. And here I was, like, doing all of this. However, the side note is when I then went to the NHS, they did not give me therapy for an eating disorder. They actually were like, oh, well, we can give you CBT for anxiety if you want, which I feel like also undermined everything when I was like, sometimes I'm like, did I gaslight myself about this? Was it that bad? But I remember like making cookies once and I was scared to inhale the sugar in case I ate some sugar. And I'm like, that is not okay. Like, I was not okay. No wonder my parents were worried, but I just did not see it. So I did end up going to a private therapist for a bit. Mainly she complained about my dad, but I did go for a bit until she gave me some advice I didn't like. I'd split up with my boyfriend and I thought she told me to go and see him. So I literally drove from the session to his door and he like shut the door in my face. And I was like, I'm never going back. You're a terrible therapist. So now I'm like, she probably didn't even say that, to be honest. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, I just ghosted her, which I would not recommend anymore. There's probably more stuff. But I think what had happened is she had like shaken up some food rules. And, when I learned certain techniques for working with people, I'm like, oh, she asked me those kind of questions that made me like question my beliefs and like, loosen those food rules. But actually, sorry, this is a long version. I've gone on too long, but let me just try and wrap it up. Then I got extreme hunger and started binging and it was like uncontrollable. I think as well, the therapist was not a specialist in eating disorders. And so she was like, well, when you wake up in the middle of the night to binge, why don't you do some yoga? And I was like, no, like I cannot explain to you that I just say compelled. I just have to go and do this, no matter how much I hate myself, because I've been, not eating enough for a year and a half and now I can't stop myself. So I don't think she quite got that. And I guess I think my clients like working with me because I'm like, okay, I get it. There's things that we can do about this, but I get how you're feeling right now, that you just have to go and eat this food for various reasons, obviously. So yeah. And then I actually thought I was all right after that. Once I actually had more food in my body and I had challenged some food rules and I was eating enough that I could go and eat out and things, like I was still trying to eat healthy, but it wasn't, too bad. But I forgot to say, then I started making myself throw up, which is not a good idea because it doesn't actually compensate for everything that you're eating. And it's actually quite dangerous. You can just Google health effects. So yeah, I thought I was okay, but I was still making myself throw up every week. But I was in total denial again that anything was a problem. I started my PhD. I had a health food blog. I was just so in denial. It's so weird when I look back at the memories about it. And then my second year of my PhD, I got really stressed because I thought I was behind. So again, like I think the self-worth thing was coming in, that then the binging and purging just got really, really bad. And then I was like, right, I need to get help because I can't do this anymore. I think until that point, my dad had asked me what was going on and I just lied straight to his face about it because I just wasn't ready to deal with it again. So yeah, that was the semi-long version. We could go longer, but I think, I suppose it just shows like the ups and downs that people go through and how I think sometimes people think, oh, it's an eating disorder, it fits in a box. But actually, people go through a lot of different phases and changes often. I guess in my experience, we're working with clients. People are never like, oh, I did this for 5 years and it was always the same. Thank you for listening.
No, yeah. I was always the kid that, in high school where I was in the girls' bathroom counseling the girls that had trouble. And I too followed the path with psychology, probably because I had my own stuff to heal also. I ended up pivoting to speech pathology for my master's and then later integrative medicine for my PhD program. So it took a few twists and turns, but what you said about eating disorders and how those perceptions can, manifest in so many different ways. I can totally relate. I know I shared with you before that when I was younger, I had an eating disorder problem for probably 10 full years of my life. Um, it's real stuff. And I'm really glad you're here to share about it because there are so many listeners out there that might be in these patterns and they can't put words to them, or they don't quite grasp what that is, or they feel alone, or they feel like it can't ever get better. And you and I are both living proof that we can heal. Rachel, was there a moment when you realized that healing wasn't about trying harder, but about understanding how your brain learned to protect you?
I suppose two moments. I feel like the first moment I did try hard after that. So it wasn't a whole like revelation. But I think it was understanding how my binging and purging was like a habit because I'd done a lot about habits during my PhD, but I just hadn't applied it to myself. I just kept thinking like, I need a new diet. When I find this new diet to eat the perfect thing, get the perfect body, then I can stop binging and purging. But obviously that's not really how it works for most people. And I think so at the point when I was like, I cannot continue like this, it's taking over my entire life. And I just feel awful, physically awful every day, like my bank account, like, my productivity, which was important to me, and, all of those things, friendships and just everything. Yeah, I did get help. I tried to go to a charity and they said, sorry, we can't help you. You're too severe. You can go to the NHS. So I did go. I am not the best patient, inverted commas. I went for a couple of sessions and then decided to stop going. But something I learned was so important that I realized at that point, the binging purging was avoidance. Like I was avoiding doing my PhD work. And I think it had started more about body image than like a way to cope with how I was feeling. But it was, sorry if this is like too in depth for people. But I do like to talk about it quite bluntly because, it is what happens to people. I don't try and be like crude, but like I was, I would only ever binge and purge in the evening to begin with. Oh, and by purge, I mean like making myself throw up in the evening. But then it got to be like earlier and earlier in the day, almost like I kind of broke the ceiling of it somehow. So I would go home from uni and then I would start binging and purging. And that meant that I didn't have to go back. It was almost like a reason and an excuse to myself. Like, oh, but now you're really tired. Like I was so drained, honestly. I say I felt like a zombie from it. Like I don't have to go back. And I hadn't realized that. And so I think once I knew that, I was like, okay, well, I know about breaking a habit. It feels like a habit now. The reward is that I don't have to go back to uni. Then I'll be able to do something about it and implement different behaviors in that time. So I don't think I didn't understand all the layers of it and what was going on then, but I did understand how to break a habit. So I was like, right, let's just go with that. But I guess in that sense, it did take quite a lot of willpower for me to be like, right, I'm going to do something different now because I still have that overwhelming urge to do it, but I'm just like not going to let myself, which sometimes was successful and sometimes wasn't. And then I think later on, it was probably only when I'd done various different trainings that I was like, oh, these are other ways to look at it. And I guess what I implement with my clients, we will look like, how do we reduce the urge in the first place? So you don't have to fight it. And, if it comes up, what are the other things that you can do to like calm it? Specific to you though, I don't know about your experience or anyone listening, but you go online, it's like, well, go for a walk or read a book. Like as in my therapist, like do yoga, which to be fair, I did start yoga at that time, not in the middle of the night, like a yoga class, and it was really helpful. But I don't think that on its own would have been enough for me at the time. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
How do you help someone understand that their behavior isn't a flaw, but a learned response that's rooted in protection and survival?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways and a couple of different activities that we might do. And I guess from the trauma informed side, I would never be like, right, we're definitely doing this today. I'll get the client's consent and talk about, what we might be doing and, the pros and cons of things. Or some people are like, right, just tell me what to do. But one of the things is like a lifeline activity, which can be quite interesting. I mean, if people are like upfront, like I have this massive trauma, then I'll probably do things differently from the start. But if people are more like, I'm not sure where this came from, like what's going on, I don't really think anything too much has happened, we might do it a bit differently, or we might just leave out certain chunks if they know they have certain specific traumas. But I guess, yeah, just looking at what has been going on in your life, like honestly draw a graph of how either like how you felt about your body on the y-axis, or sometimes people's weight or something like that, or how they were feeling about their body, not specifically their weight or just in general, or like how much they think they were eating, and then their age across the bottom of the graph, and looking like, okay, when you were young, what was going on in your family in terms of like people's relationships with food, how you were being taken care of. Because I think it's quite revealing, because we don't often think like what was going on when we were younger. But, if you came home from school and you weren't made dinner, but then you got pocket money, so you'll go to the shop after dinner and just not after dinner, after school, and spend all your money on sweets. It makes sense why you would learn to do that as like a habit, doesn't it? Or, if maybe your needs weren't met as a child, or like specific abusive situations were happening, or like neglect situations, then people can often learn like food is a way to regulate my emotions. Food is something that, for a lot of people is available to them, potentially in the house, or like I say, use a pocket money or something like that, to soothe you. I think when I often work with people who are binging, there's that part of them that wants to stop it, but then there's part of them that's like, but nothing makes me feel as good as this binge. I can't imagine anything else would do this, which is why I was kind of saying like we come at it at the approach of like reducing the urges as well, or I can't remember what I'd call it now. Yeah, I used to talk about it more and call it a certain word, but like almost like increasing overall well-being, so you're not having those unmet needs in the first place, or they're not as unmet, they're semi-met, so you like, oh, actually I don't feel like I need that binge today because today hasn't felt as overwhelming as it usually does. So yeah, the question was, how do I help people understand what's been going on? So it might be literally looking like that. It might be hypnotherapy as well, can be really interesting. So the kind I do, usually people would be going back to a memory. There's different ways to do it as well it's all trauma informed, but some is super like careful, gently, and other people are like, right, let's just get into it straight away with less of the preamble and things. But yeah, looking at, okay, where did you learn? Well, it depends specific for each client, but if they're like, I know I shouldn't feel guilty about eating, but I feel really guilty every time I do it. And, we would look at that. And often it's quite interesting, because the thing that they feel guilty about isn't even about food. It's about something else that has been, gone on when they were younger. And like when we can look at that situation as an adult, you can usually see, well, actually that wasn't your thing to feel guilty about, or it wasn't, anything to feel guilty about anyway, and like understand that situation a lot better and like let go of that guilt. So yeah, I just think it's so interesting in the hypnotherapy sessions as well. Quite often people will come up with things that they didn't tell me in like before. And they're like, I never realized that thing was related, because I guess the theory in hypnotherapy is that you're accessing the subconscious mind and looking like, where did these beliefs come from? And I think sometimes people's conscious mind gets too involved in it, like, oh, it can't be that thing. Like I recently had a client who had Tourette's when she was younger, but she didn't tell me for ages in the sessions because she didn't think it was important. And then it turns out that like she had learned, people are looking at me, people think I'm the weird one. So when she almost got that, I'll say under control, maybe there's a better way to phrase that, but like when that had stopped happening and she'd stopped having the tics so often, she was still thinking, people are looking at me, I'm the weird one, it must be my body, because I'm also seeing all this other stuff about how I should look on TikTok. So it must be my body that people are looking at. And that belief had remained, even though the reason that it was there in the first place wasn't. So I just think it can be so interesting that when people understand those things, I think you can be a lot more compassionate to yourself and think that other people in that situation could have acted the same way that you did and be having the same responses that you are now. Because I think you alluded to in your question, like, people often think there's something wrong with me. To be honest, I still think that now sometimes when I'm like, why am I doing this thing that I don't want to do? But then I remind myself like, okay, there are reasons. We might never find out every single reason, but I think when people have a, I guess, understanding of it that makes sense to them, I think that can be really revolutionary.
Yeah. So I heard you say essentially that you have a process of which you have a deep personalization with your clients, and you really look at not just who they are now, but their life, their patterns, their experiences, the things that trigger them, how it shaped the individual that's sitting in front of you at that moment. And then you really are skilled at bridging them into forgiveness and acceptance of who that person is today, but also you're also a bridge of how to shift into the person that they want to become. When someone says, "Why can't I just stop doing this?" What's the first thing that you want them to understand about how their brain is wired?
Yeah, I think your brain is always wired to protect you. I think the cool thing actually about the hypnotherapy sessions is we're looking like when this belief started, it was protecting you in some way, but that has like outrun its purpose almost. It's like outlived its usefulness now that your life has changed. So if people are binge eating, for example, maybe the example that I gave earlier, that food wasn't available in the evening, so they would spend their money on sweets because that's easy available kind of food. Actually, as an adult, they possibly are having dinner in the evening and then they're still binging. And it's like, oh, actually, now I can see that that food is available. And some kind of inner child work, which can be like kind of cheesy, but kind of nice. Like, there's a technique called upgrading your inner child. And kind of bringing them into your world now, which is really like people really get on board with it. It's really really nice. I'm like having a big smile here. I love doing that bit. Sometimes when I have male clients, they're a bit like, "Oh, all right, go on then. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and do this." But I think they actually sometimes they cry because I feel like men never get the opportunity to do stuff like that as often. So it's probably a bit different for them.
You hold such a compassionate stance around trauma informed care. For beginners, how do you explain it, what it actually means in everyday life?
Ooh, everyday life. I think this is really tricky. And we spoke briefly on Facebook before this, didn't we? Because I think this is something that I am struggling with because I think I've almost gone too far with it in terms of like being over aware of how I could impact other people. And almost like I'm looking for the caveats in the first place, like, oh, I don't want to say that because that might upset someone in this way or that way. But everyone is so different, aren't they? And I think like most people don't set out to do harm, but it can come by people, I guess, being unaware about certain things or like actively racist or actively, homophobic or something like that. But I think a lot of us, I think it is so tricky because I think since having birth trauma, I'm more aware of it as well. Like I knew about it in the field of eating disorders in terms of like, for example, when people say, "Oh, you look well," people's brain might process that as like they're saying I look fat or they're saying that I put on weight now, which is a negative and it's not the way the person intended it. Or, do even just small comments that people might make? Actually, someone made one the other day and I was a bit cross with myself after for not calling them out on it. We went to get some Christmas photos of my kids and then they got some sweets. Before I had kids, I was like, I will not bribe them with sweets. And now sometimes I'm like, oh, shall we get some sweets after we do this thing? But yes, anyway. Yeah, the lady who had taken the photos made some comment about like, oh, I haven't had an advent calendar this year because I'm being good. And it's not the worst thing anyone could say, but obviously because I work with people who are so impacted by that, and I'm like, but it's one tiny square of chocolate a day. It's in my mind, it's not going to make any difference to anything. If you enjoy the tradition, go ahead and enjoy the tradition. But she was on a diet, so she obviously got the black and white rule, like, well, not obviously, I assume chocolate is bad, so I'm not going to have an advent calendar. I don't want my kids to grow up with language like that. Like, oh, I'm being good, or no stuff like, oh, this is junk food, or whatever other names people call processed food. I'm like, what was my point now? I've gone on a total tangent with that story. Oh yes, how do we be trauma informed? I think as well recently someone I follow on Instagram posted one about diabetes and things that people might say to a diabetic, like, oh, it's so good that you can't eat sugar. Like you're so almost like you're so lucky that you can't eat certain things because that could have an impact on their weight. Or just things that like sound a bit tone deaf. But I think sometimes unless you're so in that situation you wouldn't realize. So to me, I guess it's having an openness when people are telling you these things are upsetting to me, if they have felt like they can tell you, that you would be able to, I guess, remember that in future if possible. But then I'm like, well, I've done an Instagram post about this recently. Everyone has got so much going on though, haven't they? That maybe you've got so much going on that you forgot that thing that someone had told you. So I just think it's so tricky because we're all just trying to navigate the world and do all the million things that we need to do.
I think we're all doing the best we can with what we have
Mm-hmm.
in every moment. I think, for me, I used to be the exact same way in terms of always anticipating how what I said how other people might take it. But I think that might be one should I say it, gift from my last brain injury is I think that part of my brain just got my filter, and that part of my brain that wants to over anticipate. It sounds like it's a gift that I kind of lost that. But I think really, Rachel, just remember that you don't have any control over what other people are thinking. You're never going to be able to control what other people are thinking. Other people are always going to have something to say about something, but that's not our responsibility. We don't have to buy into that. We don't have to subscribe to that. So I think if you just honor you, that regardless of what the lady in the shop says about the food, you're going to be a really good model for your children, and you're who they're looking to, right? You're the model for how they're learning to live their life. And it's really a gift to them that you've had the experiences that you have. We often hear you're not overreacting, your brain is protecting you. And I think you maybe even said that earlier. How do you explain that relationship between the brain, the body, and perceived safety?
Yeah, I guess I would explain it in terms of like your brain is perceiving that as a threat, and different people perceive different things as a threat, as we've mentioned, based on your life experiences. I think it is something that you almost can't control to a certain extent if that reaction has started. But I do think it's something that people can learn skills after the fact to be like, I've noticed this reaction is starting. So what do I do about that right now, in terms of, maybe people find things more or less effective, but like breathing techniques or like essential oils, and things like that. Like one one example is coming to my mind as well. Like when my first baby was little, and then my mum, I was quite specific about weaning because I'd read so many different things. And I think I was, trying to be a good mum, inverted commas. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to do these whole foods and these purees and things. And then my son just basically just kept being sick with everything. He didn't have any allergies or anything. I don't really know what was going on, but he just like kept vomiting it. Like he'd eat a bit and then he'd vomit again. So I feel like we were a bit struggling. I hadn't anticipated that this would happen. I just thought, oh, he'll eat everything and it will be lovely. I was quite naive. Yeah. So then I was at the pub with my mum and my grandparents and my baby, and she was like, oh, we gave him this blueberry yogurt pouch yesterday. Do you want to take the rest of it home? And I was like it. Oh, and then she was like, oh, he really enjoyed it and really ate it up. And like, honestly, like I wanted to leave and cry. Like I had such a strong reaction to her just being like, oh, we've given him this yogurt thing. But I feel like it was just after not being respected for my birth, which we don't need to all get into, but it felt like she is not respecting me. I've kind of told her what I would like to happen about the food. And, you can discuss it either way. Like she was looking after him so she can have some autonomy. It's not who knows what's the right thing in that situation. But like, I think my brain was like, it was already very sensitive. I think at that point I'd had CBT, but I hadn't had EMDR about the birth. And it was like telling me it's this massive threat that my mum's given him some yogurt, even though in the scheme of things, everyone will be like, but it's really a small thing, just get over it. I literally had to make myself be like, right. I felt like it's so tricky, isn't it? Because some stuff on paper, you're like, well, actually on paper, this probably is overreacting. It's a bit of yogurt. Sometimes you can rationalize it. But for someone to say that to me would feel very invalidating when I'm feeling in my body that my heart is racing. I've got really hot. The room feels like it's getting smaller. So I guess I think it's just about learning yourself more, isn't it? And being able to have that conversation with yourself, because I think it sometimes feels a bit less invalidating when it's coming from yourself than someone else just telling you almost like, just get over this.
Yeah, and we're not really taught how to do that from an early age, are we? I mean, I don't know very many people that were taught from, younger or even in young adulthood how to be nice to ourselves on the inside, right? We're our own worst critics. We're very judgmental of ourselves. And what you described, it sounded like you experienced a boundary violation, regardless of how it looks on paper. And that's exactly what we're talking about, right? That last question about explaining that relationship and perceived safety. That's exactly what it was. Your brain and your body said that's not safe. Something felt violated. And I think there's something to be said for the importance of validating your experience. It doesn't mean that you've got to react in a negative way, right? But the awareness, just like you were saying, to be present with yourself, to be aware of those processes, those thoughts, and what's going on For people who don't feel at home in their bodies, what are some of the earliest, gentlest steps toward rebuilding safety without pressure?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question because I also have a podcast. And sometimes on the podcast, I have someone who's like a yoga teacher or something, and they're talking about being in your body. And I just think for some people, that just would feel like too much, even for like a few minutes, versus like an hour long yoga class or something. So I do think it's such a good question about. I guess one of the things that I like to do with clients is have them do something nice for themselves or have them do something nice for their bodies. So it could be like, I always talk about this with my clients, but it's like I bought this body scrub from Molton Brown. I don't know, do you have Molton Brown? It's like a really nice, I suppose it's maybe like Bath and Body Works. It's like quite expensive. We have only just got Bath and Body Works back. We had it when I was little, and I remember going there for all the like glitter stuff. But we haven't had it for a while, so I think it's kind of similar. It's quite pricey, almost like luxury stuff. And it was like Tahitian sand body scrub, and it smelled amazing. And I just, whenever I had it in the shower, just had my little moment with this body scrub, and it was like amazing. So even just stuff like that, it's quite simple, but like you're doing something really caring for yourself. On the surface, like, okay, you've had a body scrub. Like you could do it without caring. You could be like, scrub, scrub, scrub. Okay, I'm getting out of the shower. But like doing it with intention with stuff like that. Or, if people feel safe, like going swimming or something like that, having this positive experience with your body, or like, I don't know, it's winter now when we're recording this, like ice skating or something like that. And I think, I say doing the nice thing, or it could be like, go get your hair done or something, or, pick a feature that you do like about yourself, and kind of, enhance that. So maybe something like that. I think it's really individual, isn't it? Because people rave about breath work, and I did sign up for like 6 weeks, I think it was, like one-to-one breath work. I think I just hated it. Like I could not sit with it. And she was like, "Oh, you're gonna be faster." And I was like, "No, I feel like I'm being judged," and all this stuff was coming up, which is probably what was supposed to. But I was like, "This is too much for me." So I think it's probably just about trying the different options and seeing what works for you, because some stuff is going to feel safer to you in the first place than other things. I think I will just say I'm not an aromatherapist, but I really love essential oils. I got very into them, and then I've I realized recently I kind of got out of them. I still do use them with my clients a bit, but not a lot, because my friend who was really into them died, and so I think I distanced myself from it a little bit because of that. But I just think like there is actually research that smelling essential oils does change our brain. Like maybe not long term, but it can actually influence our mood and how we feel. And I just think it's such a quick win if you have a scent, like some of the ones that I would use with clients are like blended. And I remember my client telling me like, "Oh, when I smell this one, it reminds me of my grandma, and it just feels like a hug." Like,
Mm.
if you need that. So I just think that can be a really quick win for people to change their state.
Identity plays such a central role in healing. How do the stories we tell ourselves shape our recovery?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think on the identity piece, I think we can get so wedded to something because we've almost like set our stall out as this is it. I guess when I was restricting, I was like, I am the kind of person who restricts, or I did lose some weight because I was restricting. Not people don't always, but I did. I'm this thinner person who does these things, or I'm a healthy person. And then always people reinforce that for me, thinking like, "Oh, Rachel's so healthy. She always brings a salad. Like Rachel's so healthy. She always works out after work." And then sometimes it can feel really awkward to change that, can't it? Because you think, well, I've said this is what I learned. I can't go against it because what are people going to think of me? But I just like to remind people, like, people are always changing their identity. Like I've probably talked about probably more about the birth in this one, but I always end up talking about my kids, even if I try not to, because they're young. They basically are, I work part-time. They're a lot of my life at the moment. Like I've taken on that identity. So I'm going to talk about it. I think as well, when, maybe people get a diagnosis, then that can become their identity for better or worse, because it explains stuff to you. But I think in terms of the people who are always changing and don't wed your identity, like an example is my uncle was a policeman. for like his whole career, and like people would buy him like little ornaments with policemen or like cards with policemen. And he found it really difficult when he retired because that was a massive part of who he was. And I think, people, if they've been teaching their whole career or something, really find it tricky. So I think just to say like, you're not alone. If you've realized like I've taken on this identity, or even I think sometimes we'll take on identity like as a people pleaser or something like that, like you have this thing about you that we were going to talk about neuroplasticity, weren't we? And we didn't. But anyway, that I do think it's possible to change these things about us, and we can give ourselves permission to do that change, which might feel scary or different or difficult. But if we do, we can make that change and have this new identity, and we're always changing anyway. Like when you were at school, your identity was like a student, and now it's not. And I think some changes are conscious and on purpose, but other changes just happen as we grow. I think I see it with clients as well. Some people, we might spend a lot more time looking to the future and what is it that they want and how do they want to be thinking and feeling, especially with the hypnotherapy as well. I didn't say, but I give people a recording afterwards. That's all like the positive suggestions. So thinking like super quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but like if you say, I want to stop binging, you have to think about binging to think about not. So if I'm like, don't think about pink elephant, you've thought about it, haven't you? Because I've just said it. So like the recording will be all in the positive. So what do people want instead? I want to feel relaxed when I go into a coffee shop. I want to check in. Oh, how hungry am I? What would I like to order? Something like that. I build up little scenarios for people, because then the repetition, they're listening to it ideally every day, not always. I'm a bit flexible. We'll see what clients want to do. But because it's so personal, people usually have told me what they want to say. It's believable. I won't be like, you are the most confident person and you are now going to be a bikini model because you love yourself. Like people are going to be like, no, I'm just rejecting that flat out. It'll be like, you're feeling a little bit better about yourself. Probably I wouldn't say like that. It's a bit boring, isn't it? But like, you're feeling a bit better about yourself every day and noticing nice things about yourself when you look in the mirror, and like kind of build it up from there. But what I was going to say, yeah, so some people like to be like, right, what is this new identity that I'm creating, that I'm stepping into? Whereas I think some more people are like, let's just let it evolve naturally and see. Because I think as well, sorry to go on a rant, but I think when people have had an eating disorder diagnosis from when they're young, and maybe I'm working with them now, they're in their late 20s or their 30s, that's basically been all they've known really. And so they're like, well, I don't really know who I am without this. So maybe like a more gradual change and seeing what they do actually enjoy is more the way to go for it. So I don't think you have to choose, oh, I need to be this new person. I mean, there probably are elements that are always going to stay the same about you, aren't there? Bit of softball debate. What makes a person a person? What makes you you? Yeah, I think you can be very active about it, or you can be more passive as it goes.
Self-compassion can feel foreign or uncomfortable for a lot of people. How do you teach it in a way that feels doable and real?
I think when you were reflecting back to me what I was talking about, I'm hoping it just kind of gets sprinkled in here and there in the understanding of things. I think some clients like a worksheet. Some clients want something to do between a session. So we might do Enough has got some really nice activities about like recognizing the inner critic and like thanking the inner critic for how they've been trying to help you. And then looking like, what would my compassionate voice say? So it might be like active, like journaling and kind of things like that. Or I think it's just bringing in the elements of like, there's the common humanity element as well. Like other people are struggling with this, that I think can make you feel less like there's something wrong with me and I'm weird. To be like, oh, okay, other people are doing this too. So I think, it doesn't help other people if they want to go away and do it from this podcast. But I try and just sprinkle it around so it doesn't feel too like, oh, now I have to love myself and be kind to myself. And I think also we've just discussed like we are our own worst critic. Like I'm still critical of myself. I just try and have that self-awareness to be like, okay, we're back here again. There's a reason why, you're critical to yourself about this. What can we do about it? I think there are so many resources online, like workbooks about it. If it was something that people do you want to build up?
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity to play all the roles, right? So in my journey, I had to learn how to become my own best friend, my own mother, my own father, right? Those all relationships were very different, but it's an opportunity if you look at it that way and you think, well, I can redo that inside of me, right? It's very empowering. When someone begins to rewire, what does that process look like in real life? Not the polished version, but the human one.
Good question. I think I find it tricky to answer this because different people are different. I feel like some people like make a behavior change very quickly. Like I'll start working with them, and I typically work with people who are binging purging because that was my experience. That actually you might stop the behavior quite quickly. So it feels like, maybe that habit has changed, but they, maybe still don't like their body and will be working more on body image type stuff. Or other people, it does seem like a more gradual, like, okay, I had less to eat for this binge than previous. So that's a win in terms of if they want to stop doing it completely. But, I feel like with them, I don't know how to describe it, but it feels like everything accumulates. And then it's like, oh, it's okay, it's dropped into place. Almost that it needs like sifting around somehow before it drops into place. So yeah, I just think different people are different. I can't really give you an answer.
That's okay. What's one small practice that helps someone reconnect with their body in a safe way?
One small practice. Oh, like edit out this pause. I think it's so
So, you
tricky
know what?
because
Hold on. I want to tell you kind of what we're going to do with that. That might help you a little bit.
okay.
So, with this question, whatever it is that you say, I'm going to recommend that for the next week that our listeners take the opportunity to do that one small practice.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps you at all, but
Yeah, I was going to say it's tricky because I think coming back to the trauma informed thing, different things feel safe for different people. So I'm like, oh, what's one thing? Do you know what? I'm just feeling cool to say this, and I don't think it's even a proper thing. But do you know, sometimes when you just put your hand on your heart and you're just like, okay, I'll just have this moment and like sometimes just feeling your heartbeat. Sometimes I can't feel my heartbeat. I'm like, oh, where's it gone? I just feel it's quite grounding, isn't it? Or like it's really cute when
hmm,
my kids are like, oh, mommy, can we hear your heart? Because as an adult, you don't really do stuff like that, do you? Unless you're a doctor. So I feel like you're just feeling your heart to be like, oh, okay, it is beating. Like I've been through all of this stuff, and I feel like your body. Well, the caveat here is, I guess people. Let me say the thing and then do the caveat. Your body has been there for you through this, like trying to keep you alive. I think the caveat is people listening who, are going through a serious health complication or something, or you mentioned with the brain trauma, but I do believe that your body is trying for you the best it can to communicate with you and, keep you alive. So yeah. How do you feel about that as that advice?
I
Put your
love
heart.
that. I love that. How long do you think they should practice? Because I think we don't want them to do it for a second and be good. What's a good amount of time that maybe they can just sit with their heartbeat
Hmm.
and be present with themselves?
I feel like probably the ending point would be when you've like appreciated it. I feel like it needs some sense of appreciation, like, oh, okay, yeah, my heart's here, it's there supporting me.
I love that. That's very nice. What's one aha moment you often witness? The moment when something softens or begins to shift?
I think it's when people, feel like people know what they're supposed to think in inverted commas. People are like, oh, I can't think of examples now, but it's like, do you know all the motivational quotes or all the catchy things that you see on like social media that people are like, come on, brain, think of one. I feel like it's when they talk their talk, they're like, oh, I could eat when I'm hungry, but they don't believe it and they don't want to do it.
Hmm.
That then when they're like, I ate when I was hungry, I can eat when I'm hungry. Like, I don't know. It's
Hmm.
just this change that people have, isn't it? When you
Hmm.
know that they mean it that time and they've just been saying it before.
You sense alignment and resonance.
Yeah, I guess so.
If someone listening today feels hopeless, what message would you want them to hear?
Yeah, so I believe that recovery from an eating disorder, whether you've had a diagnosis and you want to call it that, or you're recognizing, signs and symptoms, or that's what you're struggling with, I think that it's always possible to change it and have a more positive relationship with food. And I guess my definition of recovery is that almost if that thought wouldn't happen very often, like the thought to do those things, that the behaviors wouldn't be happening. But if they did come back, that it feels like not something that you have to act on, and it's not like, do you know when people talk about, oh, let the thought float past? I feel like for me, there have been a few times since I have felt recovered that the thought has come there, like less than once a year. It's not often, but to be like, oh, you should make yourself throw up now. But I'm like, no, it feels like a thought, not like an instruction and you must do this. And I can like step back and be like, okay, what's going on? Like usually when I've put myself under so much pressure and I'm really stressed out and it's like, oh, you can avoid this now and it will be a good outlet. And I'm like, well, no, it won't, because I'm not going back there, because I feel like if I let myself, not that I want to, if I would let myself do it once, well, why wouldn't you let yourself do it again and again? Like it doesn't seem like a thing that I would do anymore. You know, it's not appealing to me. I don't think it would give me the same satisfaction that it did before. So like I can have that conversation with myself and it doesn't take a long time to be like, no, actually, you know, these are the reasons that we're not doing that anymore, because it doesn't actually solve whatever problem you think it's going to. So I guess that's my definition of recovery, that you would have more freedom to do these things that you want with food and have that flexibility and things like that. That I think is possible for people. It can take a longer or shorter time, but I think, you know, I've spoken to people in their 70s, had anorexia their whole lives, and they're like, right, I'm done with this now. I don't want like my final time on earth to like, you know, be taken over by this, and feel quite motivated. So I do feel like, you know, different people have different factors that they need to, you know, maybe overcome, but I think it's possible for everybody.
Yeah, and it's never too late. It's never too late to choose into your growth. Are there any myths about healing that you wish that you could dismantle?
Oh, maybe not healing, but I guess with like eating disorders specifically, I think a myth that we hear a lot, which is kind of related to healing, is like, just eat normally. It's almost like, well, just decide to do it and do it. And I think for some people, yeah, that can work to some extent some of the time. But, you know, there's usually a lot going on, as we've already covered. Like, you know, people are feeling guilty about eating, like, you know, how they're feeling about their body. And that's, I mean, just two examples. But, you know, there's so much depth and not variety, that's the wrong word. But, you know, there's so much going on for people that being like, well, just go out and pick something and eat normally. Like people saying that just don't understand what is going on. So I think often when we're healing, there's like I guess there is a lot going on, that it's not just an overnight thing. I've had some clients who've had amazing results with hypnotherapy, and that belief has changed. And I've been like, oh my God, like what just happened? Like you know, and they've backed it up in the next weeks. I'm telling you, you know, what they've done and how it's changed. But that's not everything ever. They might still hate their body because we've worked on that one aspect. So I think almost set yourself realistic expectations maybe. And, you know, if people are telling you different and it doesn't feel true to you, like you don't have to engage with that, because I think you can go online and read the most fantastic, amazing stories. But if that's making you feel upset right now, don't do it. If it's making you feel inspired, go and do it.
Yeah, I really feel, and my clients would agree, healing is really multidimensional. And it's not as out there as it sounds. Who we are as beings alive on planet Earth, we have a lot of levels. We got the physical, the emotional, the mental, the energetic, the spiritual. We've got a subconscious that's like the iceberg that's under the water instead of just that tip. And it's really important that we honor all the parts of ourselves and integrate all the parts of ourselves for healing. Rachel, thank you for this beautiful and grounded conversation. Your ability to bring clarity, compassion, and science together is such a gift. I know so many listeners will feel seen in new ways today. For those who want to learn more about Rachel's work, the links will be included in the show notes. Thank you all for joining us today on Neuroalchemy with Dr. Sarah, a NeuroSynergy podcast. I'm Dr. Sarah Young, and until next time, may you keep listening to your intuition, honoring your healing, and becoming who you're meant to be. Bye, everyone.